government believe the activism consists of efforts to promote impact directs and intervene in social, political, economic, or environmental reform with the desire to make changes in society towards a perceived greater good. For example, we can protest against the exploitation of workers in the campaign of empower social movement, etc. Ladies and gentlemen. So, as opening government, our stance is that we want to have a precise standard for student activism activity, ladies and gentlemen. So we as governing government, we want to set the standard of 7 as the requirement of graduation, or if it's not a requirement for graduation, we still want a precise standard, which is precise scoring for that, because we want a clear result that is just. So first, let me talk about how university operate and what is the interest of these universities, ladies and gentlemen. So we see that university here has the right to set any kind of requirement for for their graduation, ladies and gentlemen. Second, they also have vision and mission. Their vision and mission is to create a scholar who has capacity to contribute to the to its society, to their society. So therefore, it is important, especially in the developing countries, ladies and gentlemen. So moving on, my first arguments. Do do why do we need a clear standard, or we need to standardize a prerequisite for graduation, ladies and gentlemen? First, as the requirement of graduation, we want to have habituate these students during the college period, ladies and gentlemen, because we see that these college periods are actually very, very long. You spend at least 4 years in that. You're having such kind of many activities in that, and you have many time to engage with any kind of preferences or hobby that you want, ladies and gentlemen. So we see that, because we see that there are so many that you want, ladies and gentlemen. So we see that these students are actually having favoritizing certain activism activities, for example, like gender activity or any kind of that, because we see that there are so many form of activities such as gender or labor or anything, etc. We see that this is very, very important to value you know uh, to explore what they have done in their college period, ladies and gentlemen. So even if you cannot make that as the requirement for the graduation, at least the students will never graduate as an individual of a centrist individual, ladies and gentlemen. For example, like when you want to be rich, for example, like you are working so hard that you want you are applying on a very big company that you want to work there, but you already only have your academical score. Ladies and gentlemen, it is okay, because there is no minimum for standard for that, ladies and gentlemen. So as we all said before, that 7 is not a burdening standard, as it is actually very, very average, because all these activities are actually going to valued as a 7 score anyway in the end of the day. Talking about the developing countries that is going to work well with this kind of mechanisms, ladies and gentlemen. So number 1 is that these countries are the characterization of developing countries themselves. Number 1 is that these kind of countries are actually very, very are in progress for progressing, because we see that maybe these countries are actually coming from third world country, or they just move from another form of government, for example. So we actually very, very understand, or that these countries are actually need very tight supervision in terms of economy, or we see that they really need a good government and a good labor to boost their economic condition, ladies and gentlemen. So it is good for them to make this student engage to these particular factors, because we see that the outcomes is actually very, very good, because number 1, as I said before, that we're going to habituate the students, because we want them not to make them selfish, because they will join we're never going to let them selfish. For example, like we will never they will for example, like they will join a labor union, for example, or they're following any kind of gender activism during their labor union, for example. We want to supervise any oppressing policies coming from the government or unfair or evil companies that is they try to supervise, ladies and gentlemen, because we see that if this continues to progress, these students are actually graduate with so much caring on poverty and support poor people, ladies and gentlemen. We see that any kind of awareness from these students are actually very, very important, because we see that college student is actually the only actors that can do this, ladies and gentlemen. So talking about characterization of student self, they're very at the very first place, they're very critical in analyzing any kind of issues, especially coming from the government rights. So we see that these students are actually not going to blind in any kind of source of information, because they're able to compare and to compare it to another issues, ladies and gentlemen. If it is not going to stick out, or it's just going to formality, for example, it's going to perfectly fine, ladies and gentlemen. Because at least when you go for score, for example, it's actually a very, very applicable, for example, ladies and gentlemen. So even, or if it's only for formality, for requirement of graduates, it is okay, because we see that these people, we don't want to burden any we don't want to put too much burden to this kind of students, ladies and gentlemen. So our main concern is that to habituate students, because habit will likely to be a good start to begin with, because it is going to last very, very long, and it is going to continue to another generation. For example, like when you these students graduate, and then they continue to teach their juniors, for example, like that, ladies and gentlemen. So that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam, for that speech. To open the case of Pop, Ikelopan Elko. Here.
Sorry, can you give a minute? My teammate is still drinking water.
Okay.
Okay, am I audible? Okay. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Under opening opposition, we want quality of activism over quantity within activism. We want our students involved in activism being genuine without force them under the notion of prerequisite for graduation. Developing states still have so many problems in enrollment of policy, politic instability, law enforcement that is currently low. In order to create stabilization, activism raised in status quo. That they see those problem result in suffer of so many people with less power, like exploitation of workers, cheap labor, etc. This problem is really complicated, that the value of activism hold a high bar that is coming from your heart. It isn't something that you can galvanize at the very first place. We don't want temporary people as part of our activism, or as this is a long fight. And we say, moreover, under opening government, there's a lot of students is going to be harmful within this kind of policy. I'm going to clarify several things that is not as necessarily answer under opening government, right? Number one, they never told you why this is what is the means the obligations, why they have to obligate their students in the universities to go to activism. Because we say the right moment for you to actually obligate something, if you have crisis, right? When the people is not aware anymore about your country. We say this is not happen in the status quo. There is no urgency under their side of the house because people still can criticize all of this policy. They can still intervene in the more heterogeneous way. So we say there's no urgency at all. Moreover, the student is like, for example, if they say that university has right to say that scholar has to contribute, we say this right only a form of oppressions coming from university because they right now intervene student purposes. It is really personal. Moreover, we say when you want to say like prerequisite, we question, do you implement it to all subject that is not necessarily would gain benefit or will gain any a chance for self-development within this kind of student, right? Because in terms of university, there is so many subjects, there is so many particular major. We question, do you want to make it for all? If you want to make it for all, it is going to be harmful because these students come to this university with expectations. We say that's going to be harmful under their side of the house. The last one about the score 7, right? Minimum 7. We say the picturization of you being scored 7 is relatively high, ladies and gentlemen. You will like activism like this kind of level when the moment you go to the road, you not just speak in the social media, for example, you go to the road, you active in the participation to the extent that you sacrifice your life, then that's the moment you go to then you get the graduation. It's going to be harmful because not all students have those capacity. That's going to be harmful and exclusive under their side of the house. We say this is bad. There is two things that I will bring in my speech. First of all, why make it as obligation is unnecessary policy, and second of all, how activism under our side much more better. First argumentation, why make it as obligation is unnecessary policy. First of all, let's start with the purpose of education. So the purpose of this kind of people going to the university. This university provide you education. So when the students going to this university, this kind of university should make all of the knowledge being accessible for everyone. That there is no constraint to them being accessible of education, right? For them to actually pursue their career to get a certificate and so on and so forth. Not all major need activism as part of how they're going to understand their subject. For example, it's like different like philosophy major and any humanitarian subjects. These people is never gonna get what they want. We say this kind of a university already falsify the rights of the students to actually go to pursue their purpose, to actually you say like they talking about selfishness of the student, right? We question why the selfishness only can be cured if you go into the activism. We say there is so much externalities that affect this kind of selfishness, right? So we say this is not exclusive under their side. This is really blurry under their side of the house. We say not all people interested in activism, right? You have to realize that. Because these students have this different capacity and different purpose and different interests. Like the capacity to go as to join the activism isn't for that their capacity is not in that field. Not all people is, for example, that healthy. There's some people that have no worry about capital, so that they have no worry about their future. Because we say this university students coming from different backgrounds, they already understand how suffer they are. And the only way for them to improve their life, for example, is through university. When the moment you going to make these people as activism, for example, you are only going to give them double burden in order, like for example, they already worried about their family, and the moment the university prerequisite them being activism, they will they will not get any knowledge to actually pursue a career to uplift their family from poverty. This kind of people is going to feel suffer as to fight for not what they actually want. We say this selfishness, the care to other people, the policy of government and awareness about it is already being done in so much ways that this kind of students don't have to be obligated in the very first place. We say when the moment you make this as obligations, only certain people that going to benefit from it later on, from the people that is actually interested to the activism activities, or for example, that people that's really care about how this policy should be worked or how the government should respond to the demand of the society. Moreover, activism need people that take heart to what they want to pursue, right? The moment this temporary student opt in, they're gonna lose anyway. They're not gonna be stay longer with this activism, right? We don't want it. The students only going to last there for a while. So selfishness is not solved under their side of the house within this kind of prerequisite. This isn't making any impact to regenerate activism or to actually criticize the policy for the government. So we say this is unnecessary disregard this to begin with. Second of all, how activism under our side is going to be look like. We say this kind of people that going to involve in activism is only people that are genuine. We don't want to constrain the people. We also want to being part of us. We say this kind of people should be also genuine, because actually these people, the students, they if they want to go to activism by themselves, actually they willing to take any information to support the activism, to build up the activism, to actually make them as a legitimate their criticism as a legitimate as the legitimate one. This is the people that we want. We say under status quo, students also involved anywhere, right? In the activism, they also raise their voice to criticize the government. So we say when the moment you make it as prerequisite, there are so many people that's going to be harmful. We say, even if, for example, this kind of student is going to be less likely to go join in activism, that's okay, because it's just a long fight. We need people to dedicate to it. We don't want people to sacrifice their life for something that they don't want, because it's just another form of oppressions. We're very proud to oppose. Thank you.
Thank you, LO, for that speech. To close the case of opening government, I call upon DPM. Here.
Check, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, is it clear enough?
Yes.
Okay. So if you have any BRI, you can just unmute yourself, because it's most likely for me to check the chat box. So, okay, I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panels, notice the inconsistency of side opening audition, right? When you try to defend towards the quality of the help, that is to say, you try to defend about the genuineness of each individuals in helping other people and so on and so forth. Number one, we claim that claims it's also concede that the urgency of you having social activity is also something that is high, for example, right? That is to say, the condition of country that you still have really huge economic gap, for example, social disparity, and so on and so forth. So I think this debate should not talk only about the intentions of you having the genuinity, because people that is genuine, even though you have obligations inside opening government, they're still going to be genuine anyway. The component that we try to propose inside opening government is that the quantity, right? That is to say, we're going to have even much larger amount of people that helping people on the ground. They're simply, jump towards the problem, for example, giving help towards those people in need, and we claim that is also beneficial. 2 points of argumentation in my speech. Number 1, I will talk about the parameter of evaluations, because that's what open commissions try to question. Second, I will talk about the necessity of you having these parameters for the paper space, why it's something that is so important. But before that, let's do some rebuttals. Number 1, when you try to characterize that the capacity of college to help other people is also different, therefore putting prerequisite is something that is immoral for them to do so. Several responses. Number 1, I think that it's only the matter of technicalities, because it's not like we're going to force them to have the same amount of contributions, but rather we're going to say that their actions can be different, but it's valued more based on your own capacity. If you are rich, then you are able to spend money to subsidize the socialization, for example. If you don't have money, you can jump to the grounds, just simply do the hard work, for example, try to socialize about the issues, for example, or maybe as simple as educate other people that is not that is uneducated well, because they are not exposed towards educations. I think that's also possible to do so, right? Other than that, it's almost also the matter of technicalities. We still can give more score for people that probably they are not as capable and not as rich as I am. But later on they are able to get higher score when they do more sacrifices, for example, right? Because we also value them for that circumstances. But secondly, right, when you try to characterize this immoral for us to do so because we sounds forceful, I think that force is not a parameter for you to grab this kind of cases from the very first place, because the basis of university always somehow forceful, right? You are expected to have high score, you are expected to do thesis, for example, you are expected to do research when you are in certain major. There is also expectations that forceful, right? With that being said, I think that it's okay for us to, in some extent, course, as long as it comes to the greatest benefit and we have reason to do that, right? So under those circumstances, I think that it's no longer important to talk about this, the different capacity in opening of positions. Other than that, it's not important to talk about genuines, because people that are still genuine, we don't care about them. They're still going to be genuine anyway inside opening governments. Directly proceeds to contentions, right? Number one, let's talk about the parameter of graduations and why adding more prerequisite is something that's perfectly justified in opening governments. Because I think the parameter of you graduate for a university is not only about score and also intelligence per se, but also the contributions towards nations, the contributions towards society at the end of the day. Because you still, and then in some extent, you still will be your intelligence will be meaningless if you cannot imply the benefit to society at the end of the day. I think that it's zero sum if you're so intelligent, that you are so smart, that you have a really high score, but at the end you're unable to manifest that intelligence to help other people, for example, right? I think that that's also meaningless, right? Therefore, it's okay for us to expect them to jump to the ground and use that intelligence to help other people. But I think second of all, it's also common practices, right? To expect someone to help other people. For example, like how we have the obligations of KKN, for example, or probably about the basis that I already explained before. That's why I think it's okay for you to have certain amount of expectations. But moreover, principally, you as college have an obligations. Why? Because for too long, government already spent so much capital to subsidize you, subsidize the facility of your university, and help you grow inside the university. So it's just moral for you, a decent human being, to help other people when you already gain those amount of help from the government, for example. That's why I think it's also your moral obligations to help other people anyway. So under those reasons, I think that the prerequisite is not only about how you're smart, or probably you have certain amount of interest, but also how you're able to manifest that interest to help the nations, lessening the burden of governments. And that's lead into my second contention, right? Why then expecting them to have sevens in these socializations is something that is important, because you need to understand the context of developing countries, like states we play in developing states. Most of the times, their obstacle is not only about the lack amount of human resources, but oftentimes it's about the social disparity, or probably there is still the huge gap of economy that exists. So I think that's what's important for the governments, is to focus more towards how they're able to equalize people on the grounds, not necessarily to make them equal as possible, but at least they help other people that in need that's not accommodated with government subsidy. Because we characterize government subsidy is somehow limited, and we're rational enough to say that you need more powers to be able to help those people on the ground. So that's exactly why this is so important. But what are the implications, right? Number one, I think that of course that's what's obvious, is that we are able to at least lessening the burden of people that in need. As we say that those people are the most vulnerable. So even if we force this college, it's okay, because the most vulnerable here is not those college. They are privileged anyway, but the one that we need to prioritize is people that is in need. They are unable to go to certain education, for example. That's why we claim that's important benefits. But second implication is that how we are able to at least lessening the burden of governments to have more strategic subsidy, for example. Right now, probably the college will help people that need education, that government will able to allocate their subsidy towards other things that is more important, that able to help the people on the ground. Under those reasons, it was significant, very proud to propose.
Thank you, DPM, for that speech. To continue the case of opposition, I call upon DLO. Here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, I will arrange my paper and also set up my timer. My preference is through chat box, so just chat me. I will see the chat box. So I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Under opening of positions, we believe any form of forces is helpful. It can give you a good outcome in the end of the day. It will just cause you unnecessary process that in this case you so you can fulfill your purpose. For example, opening government actually want these students contribute to the society, and under our side, we believe capacity and value is actually different thing, which is when the moment you have a value, meaning it's coming from your heart, children is actually suffering, and then I have the value to help them. But when the moment talking about capacity, even if I am rich but I don't have that kind of value, doesn't mean that I will help that children anyway, right? I think what opening government need to prove to us is that they need to prove to us why every student have the value of activism, and they need to ensure us how in their best scenario when they implement this policy in university, why the students still want to continue this activism value after they graduate, since it's just a prerequisite, right, for them. And after graduate, of course, they have their own interest. So I'm not sure that under government team, the students that actually already fulfill the 7 score, for example, they will continue the value of activism that they have, since it's not really genuine, like my first speaker already told.
Point.
There's 2 things that I will bring in this debate. There's 2 things that I will bring in this debate. Number 1, why is actually this policy is unfair for the students, and also number 2, how's the outcome under opening positions. But before that, a separate response to the opening government. OG want to end this debate by saying that this policy is necessary because of this is the responsibility of universities to make the student actually contribute to the society. We say universities is a platform for a student to study, to fulfill what is actually they want to do after graduations, not fulfill the burden that coming from the university. I mean, the reason why I go to tourism university is because I want to be an owner of hotel, for example. So I need to study hard about it. But with this policy, and I don't have any values about activism, it forces me to think how actually to upgrade my value of activism, meaning that I will forget how actually to be an honor hotel, for example, meaning this university already harmed the students just because to fulfill the ego of these people. And they're also saying that they want to make selfish students. We believe that selfish or not is not the responsibility of the university, because we say that this is the choice coming to the students itself. And regarding to the contributions, I think without this policy, contribution still happens under our the house, since opening government also never told you how actually this contribution looks like, either that this contribution is you helping the kids, or you fight for the feminism, or so on and so forth. Because simply like contribution in our side, like when the moment after graduation I have a small job and I don't burden the government to be in the first place, I think it's already called contribution. Or I make a hotel, for example, I open so many job vacancy, meaning I already contribute to the society. So we believe that it's not really necessary to implement this policy. I think it's just like cost and everything. And talking about moral obligations is this rebuttals also already answered, but the moral obligation, because this moral obligation, I think when the moment after your graduation you didn't burden your government, for example, you didn't harm the people, so we believe we don't need this policy. Now going to how actually it's not fair for every students. Let's talk about unfairness, right? Like my first speaker already told you that education is supposed to be accessible for everyone, where they can actually choose what they want to do is also becoming a reason why there is a major in universities, right? So that's the reason why in universities is really different with high school, because when the moment I graduate from high school, I can choose either I want to be a doctor, I want to be a pilot, and so on and so forth. But when the moment you implement this thing, we believe that this student will be lazy to go to university, because like, what the hell is that? Because actually I don't have any field of activism, meaning that actually I cannot graduate and I cannot achieve my dream. So why should I go to universities? It's really harmful, right? Because in developing country, universities is really important for this country, because it can help to develop their students, for example, to develop their society, to giving contribution is, and I don't think it's necessary from the this policy, which is this policy also will make this student actually lazy to go to universities. And then second of all, how's the outcome under opening a position, right? I don't know, values of activism will be really pure in our the house without no externalities. I don't like under status quo, there's so many people that already have the value of activism, that even if when the moment it's not complement or it's compulsory in university, they still want to pursue it because it's already coming from their heart. And then opening government come to us by saying that this value of activism actually influenced by the social activity and so on and so forth. But we say when the moment you actually doesn't have any genuine value coming from your heart, the social activity will not work anyway. So So when the comparative is this, I think when the moment we implement this thing, okay, let's say that it's already works, and then so many students that pursue, oh, I have a value of activism, I get a score of 7, and then I graduate. I think like when the moment they already graduate from the university, they simply like just forget it, because to begin with they don't have any interest to it. What they have in interest to be rich, for example, and this is their right. For example, this is their right, and they say, and university need to help us because university is a platform to do it, right? And simply like when the moment I have a value of activism, in it's because I love kids, because you want to make a change of patriarchy, not because like not because I need to graduate for it. And then opening government saying that, oh, we don't care about genuine values activism because we will not impact them. I think like it will be really impactful, because we see that people that have values activism is someone that's special. When the moment you just make, oh, it's just average thing, you are not really special, these people will, like, don't, it's not these people is actually will not really into it anymore, for instance. And then the outcome that will happen from the society is that this people, the student that actually have activism under outside the house, they will actually want to help the children as they want, and they will not see as a burden, because opening government saying that, oh, it's not going to be burden. We believe it's going to be a burden for students that actually doesn't have interest on it, because they need to think about it, they need to think how actually to pursue it. And we believe not all students have the capacity of it. They need to focus what is actually their dream. That in the end of the day, contribution is even better under outside the house, because when the moment I pursue my dream to be a doctor without have any value of the activism, for example, I actually can help people, and it's already called contributions. So government benches need to prove to us why actually this policy is necessary, because we believe under outside the house, it just unnecessary process that will make a lot of people will think that, oh, what is actually the purpose of university? So I need to be activism if I graduate, because like it's not my willing to do it, for example. So I believe we don't need this policy, because we can make a genuine values of activism. We also can give contribution even if we don't have this value of activism. Really proud to focus. Thank you.
Thank you, DLO, for that speech. To open the closing half of the debate, I call upon member of government. Here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. My speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Panels, I think that OO's entire contribution about activism being a burden to students is an argument against the entirety of Scripsy, when in reality, I think activism, if they do have the same burden as Scripsy, is going to create much more impact in the society. And it's going to be considered something that is normal by the students and university itself if they do enforce it, right? But what OO also told you is that then they will not do it for genuine reasons. We think that in status quo, there's still a lot of people who join activism not for genuine reasons, but people who only drop by the protest to take like an Instagram picture. We think that ingenuity on our side is totally okay compared to theirs, right? Because obligation is not about your genuinity, but whether or not you are going to do it. What matters is the income, right? Is the outcome, right? If we can prove to you why, then even if we are not genuine on our side, why the outcome is still going to be much better on our side, because they're going to be like equipped with the knowledge before they protest and all, we think we win this debate. So the function of university is not to produce mindless robots. We think that the problem is to create critical thinkers in a much deeper level, right? Because the problem in developing countries is that we are very lacking in these kind of people. That's why like humanity studies that has something to do with gender studies and things like that is very lacking, or doesn't even exist in the first place in developing countries. We think that it is part of the responsibility of students to be able to think critically and to create social changes in the world that they are going to live once they graduate. So what kind of activism that we're talking about? Something that's never been covered by OG, right? We're not going to force everyone to fight for one same movement. People are able to choose which movement they want to resonate with. And we're also going to be promoting and educating all university students, of course, about the social problems, not only humanities students, but to all students and all faculties. We're going to try our best, of course, to spark interest in these students, but we're not going to force them to go out in the streets to protest. That is practically illegal. But we think that these things will only be done by the people who are willing to do it. We think that activism can be done in lots of ways, such as writing articles and doing research, other than just going down on the streets. We think that this this is why we think accessibility shouldn't be the debate brought by OO. First, I'm going to tell you why it's the responsibility of the students, because university has two broad roles. First is to foster independent critical thinking of students. This is why we're different from high school. You can self-select courses. Students enter the first time as independent actors to facilitate critical thinking in university. This proves that this is one of the roles of university. But also second, university have a social impact, right? The fact that non-economic material goods they provide solely come from things like humanity studies proves to you that this is also the role of university. Knowing this, why is it the responsibility of students? First, OO told you that university is a place to study, and as a tourism student, you don't have the responsibility of doing activism. We think that being complicit upon the current problems means that you are also contributing to the current problem, right? That means that you are validating all the wrongful acts that the government is doing, for example, especially because you are also part of the group that's also going to be affected by these policy changes. We think that in order for university students to grow as a person is for them to be able to criticize the things that's happening in their surroundings and to maintain democracy, especially in developing countries whose democracy is already continuously declining, right? But why does it have to be done through university? Exactly because this university is the only institution that's able to push and galvanize this. University consists of students who are willing to study, who are willing to do the research, and these are the exact people who are able to be affected by these policy changes. But second, we think that university is a zero-sum game. That means that one spot you take in a university is another person's spot being taken away. Especially in like PTN, for example, we think that where they limit themselves in students' acceptance, we think that we are able to put burden into these students. Especially with the existence of bribery, we think that it is part of their obligation. But third, when O told you that it is unfair because the students have no capacity to do these things, we think that this is exactly how universities work in the first place. The fact that scriptsy exists, that also requires a lot of money and a lot of contribution for you to finish. We think that activism is also something that students are going to be capable to do. So even if it is not their moral obligation, it's totally normal for them to do this. But second, why do we think that's better for students? We think that first, they're going to be more active in organizations. Before they enter the workforce, they're going to be aware of what rights do they deserve, how they're supposed to treat their workforce, right? Or if one day they become a CEO, they know how to treat the workforce. This is also creates a better quality of workforce that is much happier, therefore more productive in the long run. But second, the fact that humanity studies is declining, we're going to spark more interest for humanity studies because universities are going to highlight the social problems. There's going to be more funding put into humanities faculties and to also help them, and to also help them help other faculties to do activism together and things like that. But third, I'm going to explain to you why then we're going to create better social changes on our side of the house. Because what OO told you is that there's no urgency because people under the status quo, democracy still exists and that people still criticize. We think that criticization that happens in the status quo is only done because it's something that's trending, right? This is what's happening. This is a trend that's happening in the status quo. People only hopping on social movements because it's trending. On our side, we can actually fix these things, right? Because we think that first, protests are going to be run by university students, which is much more impactful because the universities are going to make sure that these protests that is done under the name of their universities are packed with knowledge that they need to protest, right? Make sure that they have done their research rather than just mindless protests like what's happening in the status quo. And other than that, we are also going to increase the humanities studies. More people will be interested to pursue humanities studies and understand the problems better to hold these kind of protests, right? But second, we're going to hold also a lot of research for these done by these students in order for them to graduate, right? We're going to do researches for things like more studies about gender, more studies about social movements, and also more studies about, for example, the LGBT community, right? We think that this is important because especially within developing countries that is super patriarchal and super conservative, we think that people are unwilling to learn about these things, right? Us as university students, we're going to hold research and we're going to promote our research to prove that, for example, there's a scientific evidence that these people are valid, for example, right? But third, we think that for students who are capable, students are also able to start like charity donations for like the yayasan in developing countries, for example, panti asuhan who don't treat their children well. We think that students are able to expose things like these because we have no agenda and we are totally neutral. And in order for us to graduate, for example, we need to do enough research on these things in order to expose them and not just blatantly do it for whatsoever reason, right? We think that on our side of the house, we can fix problems like these as university students. We proudly propose.
Thank you, member of government, for that speech. To open the case of CO, I call upon member of opposition. Here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. I will arrange my paper first. I will start my speech. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panels, we believe that to contribute in galvanizing activism is the option of the college student. They have right to being activism or not, because we believe all college students that graduate later will have their own way to can contribute to the state. Not necessarily we should obligate them to go like to this kind of activism. Like Mr. Madam Chair, as simply maybe as they can pay tax if they already works, right? Most importantly, in developing country, human resources needed the most, right? And we cannot obligate them because students have their form of contribution, Mr. Madam Chair. So different with OO that does not say how they can contribute to the state. Our stance in the long run, we will explain how it will be bad because first, it ruins urgency of the protest. Second, it lessens the productivity in the state. And the third of all, diminish the value of appreciation of this kind of activism itself, Mr. Madam Chair. And before coming to my issue, coming to my independent rebuttal, CG says we should create critical thinking, thus they implement this proposal. We say we say it not only happen in their side of the house to make that kind of critical thinking, Mr. Madam Chair, because first they can also have critical thinking in their study. For example, in scriptsy, we should have compromise analysis in it, right? So it is like a training about our critical thinking too. And second, not all people can have this kind of expert of critical thinking that they expect, Mr. Madam Chair, even if they already being trained, right? Because for example, like we obligate the student to high school to learn math, but not directly make them in that individual to pro in math, right? So we say it is like unnecessary proposal coming from the government bank, Madam Chair. So I have two issues here. That first, why, and all my rebuttal will be intertwined in it also. That first, why to implement their proposal to having prerequisite student to achieve a 7 minimum score in galvanizing activism is ruin the productivity of the state. And second, why their proposal will diminish the value of appreciation to the activism. So coming to my first issue, why to implement their proposal is ruin the productivity of the state, Mr. Madam Chair. They say developing country face a lot of problem, or you say like a gap income social issue, thus they would make that prerequisite as the effective mechanism. We say no, it is not effective mechanism because first, because in status quo we already see how in this kind of condition that we have diverse personality of the college student. There is and thus they have their own contribution, Mr. Madam Chair. For example, if someone to being doctor, they can also treat the patient and society as a whole, right? Comparison in their side of the house, if we prerequisite this, it will ruin the productivity of the state because first, if they do not graduate just because they do not pass the test, thus there's a lot of profession that being delayed, right? We lack of human resources, Mr. Madam Chair, like doctor, teacher, and so on, Mr. Madam Chair. There is like will disturb and ruin the productivity that we already have and already being structured, Mr. Madam Chair. The human resources will be lessened and ruin the productivity in the state itself. Productivity and contribution is so important in developing country, and the problem of it, if a country is not in the in the country, is it just not social issue, Mr. Madam Chair? They should prepare all aspect to have this kind of best human resources, Mr. Madam Chair, not only focusing into that one spectrum of social issue. We acknowledge that government banks want to make this college student contribute more with the social issue, with like keep up with the trending and so on. But notice in the status quo, we have already progressing status quo, Mr. Madam Chair. There's a lot of college students that were alone and they have trend also when conditions become worse. For example, we have Gejayan memanggil in the past when there's a certain policy that not benefiting benefiting the society, Mr. Madam Chair, and there's got a lot of support in the social media, Mr. Madam Chair. So we think the urgency of this kind of college student is should coming genuinely from themselves, Mr. Madam Chair. Okay, maybe CG said they will have this kind of way to make them genuine, Mr. Madam Chair, but it will be different, Mr. Madam Chair, in the terms of appreciation, and that I will explain later in my second substantive, right? So we do not lose the spectrum of the college student who aware with social issue also, and and moreover, we know that in the status quo we can maintain this and not just like temporary, because we have like BAM also, right, in the status quo to have like the platform to protest the government itself and so on, right? Thus their way is not strategic, Mr. Madam Chair, and our argument more important than all bans, because we are seeing in the macro aspect and in the long run to achieve to the sustainability to this state, Mr. Madam Chair, not only focusing into the one spectrum and make this kind of college student being hard to can get graduate in their bachelor, for example, because they should have this kind of seven score. Meanwhile, we know the characteristic of college student. Not all people have like critical thinking and so on, Mr. Madam Chair, but there's also a major of students that have willingly to be critical thinking, that we should encourage them to do more, Mr. Madam Chair, not obligate them, right? Like our staff, if we like to debate, we join the debate competition itself, Mr. Madam. There's a lot of human resources that exist in that university itself, Mr. Madam Chair, and even if it is not, it is better with our ways itself, Mr. Madam Chair. So coming to my second issue, why their proposal will diminish the value of appreciation to the activism. Notice panel, appreciation is important to make this activism more have value and solve the root thing, not just obligate them, Mr. Madam Chair. Because this appreciation will enhance the value of activism, how they observe, how they research think about this kind of minority of the structural problem of certain case, for example, Mr. Madam Chair, to against the exploitation of workers, because they're willing to do that, Mr. Madam Chair, not obligatory, that they're simply just in that test constantly they have a high score, but they're not heavily the truly intention on it, Mr. Madam Chair. So under our side of the house, we still have this kind of appreciation, Mr. Madam Chair, because it is not obligatory, but it is volunteer, right? It is so important because it will make sense the nuance of the society that this kind of things is so important, and the urgency in the government too, Mr. Madam Chair. Not the urgency is like shifting into this kind of activism, Mr. Madam Chair, that the government should have the eagerness to solve the problem of the state too, Mr. Madam. Not only the college student, Mr. Madam Chair, that fight for their scripts also, right? So we say it is their proposal. It's just like double burdening the college student itself, and do not have this kind of appreciation toward the activism, because the society will see that as something normal, Mr. Madam Chair, since it is that obligatory, right? So we already prove you two things about how the not effective their proposal, and how the idea of appreciation is important in the long run to not ruin productivity on this kind of state. We're very proud to oppose. Thank you.
Thank you, member of opposition, for that speech. To close the case of government, I call upon government whip. Here.
Hi, I'm very sorry. Can you give me 1 minute to go to the bathroom? I will be quick.
Okay.
I'm back. Thank you.
Okay, government whip.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Speech start in 3, 2, 1. And so I think that in order for this debate to be judged is upon which team is able to prove whether students have the moral obligation to do activism and what are the outcomes of that activism, whether it is going to be good or not. I don't think it's about goodwill and etc. I think they need to make a logical link upon goodwill and the quality of activism to begin with. Thus far, OG did a pretty good job upon why students should do good things such as having the capacity, because they have the capacity to help other people, but they never explain why is it that it needs to be in form of activism and why students have that direct moral obligation if they have the capacity to help other people. There's no connection between those two. But second, I think that also explained about people not having interest in doing activism, but no one here probably likes Scripsy, right? As a prerequisite. I think Scripsy sucks. So I think that by that logic, their argument is pretty much opposing every form of prerequisite of graduation. So I don't think that's a strategic case coming from opening opposition. 3 things in the speech. 1, principle. 2nd, social change. 3rd, why we create better graduates. So first, let's talk about the principle. OO says that this is unfair because universities forces people to do the things that they do not have interest of and they don't want to do it genuinely. First, this is something that has already been done within university, just like what my partner says. For example, if you want to get to university, you go through SBMPTN, right? And SBMPTN probably gives you a probability of failing for your first choice, and then you probably need to take your second choice if you ever not get accepted at all. At the point of which, when you probably need to take your second choice, which is not your interest, that is probably the same logic that you're trying to use, right? That means that universities doesn't have the capacity or doesn't have the right to limit other people's obligation to make a certain quota for people to get into university to begin with. But second of all, and I think this is really important, my partner extension explained to you that university is a zero-sum game. One spot that you take in your university is another people's spot being taken away. And I want to be clear here, thus far in the status quo, the only time when you are able to put an obligation towards someone is that you can only put a burden on someone when they limit other people's choices. In this case, that is to say that students within university is also taking another potential of future students and other students to be able to get into that spot within that university. Right? There's a parallel within this example. The parallel within example is when a company does a certain harm for environmental damages, hence they need to fulfill company's social responsibility. Same logic applies. You take other people's potential to be a university student, you have a direct obligation to contribute to society. And I think thirdly, OG did a pretty good job responding and rebuilding their case, but they never responded towards some of OO's case when OO talked to you about people have different capacities, for example, and to do activism and etc. Right? Why is it still fine for us to do this? My partner extension told you that this is something that is normal, such as having scripts and etc. Also requires you a large amount of money. All the prerequisite of you like going to universities requires you to get your money out of your pocket, right? Under all of those reasons, we think that on the principal level, the moment it impedes others' rights to get in spot university, you do have direct moral obligation to contribute back within society. Second, which side can create better social change? OO says that they want activism to have more quality over quantity. First, they never explain why the quality will be better in the their side of the house. I mean, the number of NGOs under both sides of the house are probably going to be symmetric. I do not understand why goodwill equals to like better quality of activism. There's no explanation about that. But second of all, even if willingness is the parameter of quality of activism, let's just take them at their best. I think that people are more willing to help. Why? Because this is a prerequisite and people are selfish, right? Even if they only care about graduating and they're willing to go to graduate and this acts as a prerequisite, this acts as an active and deriving mechanism for students to do even better in activism, right? I think that this is more charitable response than OG who just says that people will be genuine anyway, right? And then let's get into CO then. CO says that people will not value activism because it is based on obligation. First, every kinds of activism is probably based on obligation. If someone has a genuine interest of doing activism, the driving force of that genuine will is probably they feel like they have an obligation to help per individual, for example. So if they want to say that people won't value activism because of an obligation, that is something that is wrong, because people see it as something that is holy, for example, for you to help other people in need. Two, we told you that protests and etc. will be more likely under our side of the house. Critical discussion towards the government policy is more likely under our side of the house. We require them to talk about policy discussion. OO says that people will talk about it anyway. We see that you have more incentive to do so under our side of the house, and that should also count as a benefit. But three, we also told you that what happens under our side of the house is that we have more research about gender, right? This is something that is exclusive towards closing government because activism requires you to do so, right? So under our side of the house, we have more research such as about gender, for example, and about sexuality of people, especially in a super conservative country within most developing countries, right? Because of the social norms that impedes these people's right and etc. Right? Four, we also create micro benefit towards local foundation, right? This is when my partner talks to you about the characterization about foundations in Indonesia. It's really bad, where Panti Asuhan is not really feeding their children adequately. At least we give them a small needs such as sembako, for example, for their basic needs to get the enough nutrition for them to be able to survive and etc. So we think that we can cover activism better under closing government. Let's talk about students then. Why graduates are much better under our side of the house. Before that, I'll take a POI.
Okay, CO. From CO, we think how you respond our statement about growing the productivity itself.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about productivity right now. Look, what did CEO says? CEO says that we will ruin the productivity because people will graduate late. First, this is something that is wrong because developing countries are not lacking a number of workers. We literally have everyone with undergraduate degree, and the percentage of employment is really high. So I don't think that an overpopulated country who has someone with S1 literally everywhere will probably, that country will probably not have the productivity just because they like graduate a bit late, which nicely leads to my second response, right? The second response to this is exactly what my partner said when she explained to you that students are going to be more active in real life situation. That is to say that the problem right now is that the numbers, we're lacking numbers, is what CEO says. What we are saying is that the problem is that the way for you to learn within these universities is not good enough for you to be accepted within the workforce, right? Working with other people is very much different with you working and with you like studying and about a theory within university, right? Under our side of the house, when you do activism, it requires you to do cooperation with everyone, right? We say that those practical skills and all of those critical thinking will do much better on our side of the house, right? Also, what happens now is that people will not care anymore after they graduate. I think this doesn't matter because we cannot expect everyone to do activism in the long run. What matters is that there's a continuous cycle of students helping in the long run and keep doing that cycle at the end of the day, right? At the end of this speech, we are the only team that fulfill the that gives to you the link between the logical of moral obligation of students. We tell you that activism is going to be very much better under our side of the house. Very proud to propose.
Thank you, Government Whip, for that speech. To close the debate as a whole, I call upon Opposition Whip. Here.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Wait, I will set my timer first. My preference for POI is through the chat. So if you have any POI, please put it on the chat box because I will see the chat box. And I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panels, closing opposition has been different with opening oppositions, how opening oppositions are simplifying the burden of the motions, like how they tell you that when we have scant activism, suddenly they will going to forget their original measure because of the activism's prerequisite, and it is the and we closing opposition is the only thing that when explicit on how the prerequisite will harm the state coherently and with process anyway, right? But panels, opening government is also being ridiculous with the proposal by saying that implicitly that all of the government burden in solving social issues are the job of the students, right? This is also continuous within the closing government, right? Because suddenly students are the one that actually responsible for all of the social issues that is happening within the state, right? Then what are the points of people paying taxes? That is the job of the government, right? Therefore, we think that putting them as a prerequisite and so on is not something that is so urgency and anyway, right? But then closing government also came to the debate saying that we will going to do more studies about like LGBT, feminism, and etc. Right? Without necessarily characterizing how the context of developing country, for example, we tell you that developing countries are most likely to be like some of them are like conservative, for example, that it is so hard for them to actually introduce the value of LGBT or even feminism and so on and so on, right? So the moment when they want to actually enforce that idea, then what they need to answer is how then the systems will go on within the college, right? Or whether or not the society will going to reject that or so on, right? There's so many burden that they need to prove by saying that, right? Second things, how many years of study that they were going to take, because the current is like 5 years. Even we already pack enough only when the students only join like one students organization, for example, like DPM, right? You don't even have enough time to take care of yourself. They basically will put students in a long time in a college, Mr. Madam Speakers, if they want to actually put this as a prerequisite and so on, right? First, rebuttals. They say university students are the one that actually capable to solve social issues because they are able to do research and so on, right? We said no. Panels, just because students do academic study does not mean only students who own intellectual capability to be activists or doing research, right? We must understand that the activists also coming from different social background and status quo, right? If the social issue is social worker, for example, then labor will going to go to the street or march or even publishing article and so on, right? Or even environmentalist issue, then are people probably the job that is close to environment, for example, is probably work in the office or so on and so on, or even doctors, for example, will going to be even able to do so, right? So what do we mean by this? Is that those who want to like fight social issue despite maybe not even graduate from universities, for example, are able to facing out the activities or even doing research to do so. Why? Because they have the urgency to do so. If you are actually if you are a labor worker, for example, you experience the issue of wage payment, for example, you experience those kind of trouble issues, meaning that you have the urgency to actually doing research on what kind of things are happening within your situations, right? Meaning that you're also able to do those kind of research intellectual that they tell you that only students in universities are able to do so, right? They're capable to do the research and explaining an intellectual issue that they face. So closing government argument is invalid anyway, right? But the second things, these days students are the perfect actor to be representative, and by having this prerequisite, they will create better social change. We said no. First response, as the perfect actor, we tell you because if the students are stay silent, meaning that students are complicit in doing the deeds, right? We tell you that's completely untrue and very assumptive coming from their house, right? They forget to characterize the students clearly. First of all, we tell you that doing certain work deeds, for example, if any social issues, meaning that there is evil intentions, but the students have no evil intentions to actually create any kind of damage or struggles for the society, right? They do not have any kind of those intentions. What they do is they want to educate and graduate, right? Second things, they also have their own individual issue, like social background, for example. Maybe they don't want to go to the street or becoming activists because they're terrified, because they're Chinese, for example, they're terrified to be handled by the government and so on, right? Or maybe they're also coming from poor family, for example. They are the last hope of the family. So the only thing that the family hope is actually to graduate and have some job and giving them like maybe extra income for the family, right? Therefore, they're not part of the feeling at all, Mr. Madam Speakers. Even when they are incapable to participate in social issue, this also should be answering the moral obligation that the closing government glorify about, right? Because if they talk the moral obligation, the one that actually have moral obligation to do so is the government itself, right? Because we pay taxes to them, then that they are the one who solve the issue, not students in a sense, right? Second response, we also create better social. They tell you that they will going to create better social change by doing this, right? Yet they then also engage how productivity might be hampered or even block people to do graduate explicitly of the human resources, right? Because my member tell you how then that there's possibility if you use this as a prerequisite, you're going to hamper people to graduate, maybe because they have less number of being activists, right? Yes, maybe. Their response is these panels. They tell you that we have human resources and so on because we are overpopulated and so on. But But you have to understand, even if they are employed, that their job is only blue collar worker or even maybe in under minimum wage, right? Unless it tells you that they're not living fine, right? Then what we want is actually higher than that. We want higher salary for these people. And the only way for us to do so right now is actually for them to go to college and so on, right? But if you put this in the long run, people may likely unable to graduate just because of this one prerequisite that they apply, right? When in fact we can actually enrich our human resources in terms of the productivity, whether or not in office, as a doctors, and so on and so on. They never engage towards this on how they're going to be able to do so, right? But then they say that once they enter college, they're obligated to be activists because they take chance of other people or seats of other people, and so on. No, we think that not all people is actually go to public college, Mr. Speaker. There are people that actually go to private college, meaning that you actually pay for your college and so on, right? So even if your government is actually still subsidize you, government subsidize every infrastructure that they need in the state because it needs to develop, right? We tell you that the contributions of people are different, that there are people who actually contribute within their job. Maybe if there's an issue or social issue, for example, there are people who go to the street, there are people who go to the activists, but there are also people who go to work is actually to make sure that the economy is still working, right? That they actually still contribute towards the state in a different aspect, right? But if we want to argue it's a different learning academic and also on field, we tell you that in college it's not necessarily all about books. You can also still go to the field. There are still like HAOHAO and so on that you can actually access that, right? So it is ridiculous coming from focusing government by only being activists that you can actually access on how you actually interact with people, right? But outside of the house, we can still enforce social changes because panels we developing states, which also under democracy, having activism as a request graduate will result a bigger catastrophe in the long run that the state cannot even deal with, right? Because what we need to solve right now is actually the human resources and how the infrastructure work we oppose.
Thank you, opposition, for that speech, and thank you everyone for the debate. I think the announcement will be done on the closing ceremony. So yeah, thank you for everyone once again. KGB, are there going to be any room made for the deliberation? Kalau enggak, gue bisa buat meet.
There will be breakout room for the judges.
Okay, thank you, Mas.
Okay, just wait.
Sebentar ya.
Sudah di room 1, silakan. Only for the judges in room 1, judges in the finals. Randy sama Aldo bisa gabung ke room 1. Panitia untuk yang LDBI bisa dihubungi sekarang ya, teman-teman dari UPN, Ibrahimi.
Iya, Mas.
Oke. Juara 3-nya UNER, sama juara 4-nya itu dari mana? Lupa. Dari mana? Anak UNER udah dihubungi belum?
Udah.
Oh, belum ada.
Belum join.
Dari UNER udah masuk, Pak.
Uner udah masuk.
Hadir baru 1 orang, Kak.
Kamu jurusan apa di Uner?
Ilmu ekonomi dan studi pembangunan, Kak. Angkatan 2020.
Oh, kamu 2020?
Iya, Kak, betul.
Oh, belum masuk ya ke gedung ini ya?
Iya, belum sama sekali, Kak.
Iya, oke, no problem. Saya di vokasi kok. Teammate-mu dari mana satunya? Dari FEB satunya di mana?
Untuk teammate saya, satunya dari FH Angkatan 2020, terus satu lagi dari keperawatan, Kak, 2019.
Kamu masuk ADS Uner kah?
Iya, benar. Baru masuk tahun ini sih, akhir-akhir 2020. Soalnya kemarin itu opreknya agak telat, gara-gara magang UKM.
Ketemu Fasya kan? Ya, ketemu Fasya kan? Ketemu Fasya kan?
Oh iya, Mbak Fasya Aurelia. Iya. Sebentar izin ya, Kak, lagi di jalan mau ngeprint itu yang tanda penyerahan hadiahnya.
Ya, untuk yang ini ya, untuk teman-temannya segera gabung ya. Yang anak UPN udah gabung di sini. Saya tadi udah ngeliat ada UPN deh. Juara 4-nya siapa kemarin ya? Lupa ya.
Juara 4 dari UB.
UB ya?
ICUB.
ICUB udah ada nih.
ICUB belum join.
ICUB belum join ya. Oke. Yang best speaker-nya kan juga anak syafaat itu, korban semifinal.
Halo, selamat
Yang dari UPN udah bisa gabung?
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat. Halo, dengar? Halo, oke. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat sore teman-teman semua. Baik, kita akan segera memulai untuk gladi bersih closing ceremony secara virtual. Bagi yang Halo, cek. Sebentar lagi saya akan membagikan virtual background yang nanti silakan digunakan ketika teman-teman memulai atau mengikuti GR dari closing ceremony yang telah kami persiapkan. Baik, selanjutnya akan saya serahkan acara kepada Master of Ceremony pada closing pada sore hari ini. Silahkan.
Guys, mohon menunggu sebentar ya. Jurinya masih diskusi dulu. Thank you.
Yes, Kak.
Agak alot penentuan rank 1, 2, 3, 4-nya.
Bagi bersih toh.
Baik, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Perkenalkan, saya Kiki Aktia selaku MC pada acara kita di sore hari ini yang akan memandu acara penutupan serta pengumuman sekaligus penyerahan hadiah lomba debat, baik lomba debat Bahasa Indonesia maupun Unisla English Debat Competition 2021 hingga selesai. Sebelumnya, untuk para juara, kita akan melakukan simulasi penyerahan secara simbolik untuk pemenang juara lomba debat Bahasa Indonesia. Apakah sudah hadir semua? Saya sebut satu-satu. Rindang Syafaat.
Hadir, Mbak.
Hadir. Universitas Brawijaya.
Hadir, Kak.
Universitas Erlangga. Universitas Erlangga.
Kurang satu, Mbak. Yang satunya masih isi kuota.
Oh, oke. Universitas Ibrahim.
Hadir, Mbak.
UPN Veteran Jawa Timur.
Hadir.
Oke. Tinggal Universitas Erlangga ya yang belum hadir. Mungkin nanti bisa diwakilkan ya. Oke, baik. Untuk simulasi penyerahan simbolik hadiah, jadi saya akan menjelaskan untuk prosesi penyerahan dan diharapkan ini untuk rekan-rekan memperhatikan baik dari lomba debat bahasa Indonesia maupun Unisla English Debat Competition karena nantinya tidak ada pengulangan lagi. Jadi silakan untuk diperhatikan. Untuk penyerahan hadiah akan diserahkan oleh Ibu Nurafika Zulianti SOS MA dan diharapkan rekan-rekan mempersiapkan bukti tanda hadiah yang sudah di-share dan di-print khusus yang untuk lomba debat bahasa Indonesia. Kemudian nanti yang dipanggil nantinya bisa menyalakan kamera, jadi on cam dan juga on mic ya, biar nantinya bisa on di YouTube saat penyerahan bukti tanda hadiah. Jadi ketika nanti Ibu Nurafika Zulianti menyebutkan nama-nama pemenang juara, nanti hadiah bisa, bukti tanda hadiah bisa ditunjukkan ke layar seperti ini. Agar nanti bisa kita screen oleh si dokumentasi. Oh, nggak muncul ya. Sudah paham tapi ya ini? Sejauh ini paham rekan-rekan? Bisa dicoba? Jadi ini dimohon sekali lagi untuk semua rekan-rekan untuk menyalakan kamera masing-masing ya. Jangan lupa juga untuk jargon salam mahasiswa prestasi, jawabannya adalah salam prestasi. Baik, bisa kita mulai untuk simulasinya. Untuk acara yang pertama adalah pembukaan. Pre-memori. Acara kedua menyanyikan lagu Indonesia Raya. Pre-memori. Acara kedua menyanyikan lagu Indonesia Raya. Pre-memori. Oke. Acara ketiga sambutan.
Assalamualaikum.
Indonesia Raya. Oke, pre-memori. Pre-memori. Acara keempat, pembacaan keputusan juri serta pengumuman Unisla English Debat Competition dan lomba debat bahasa Indonesia. Juri serta pengumuman Unisla English Debat Competition dan lomba debat bahasa Indonesia. Pre-memori. Acara selanjutnya penyerahan hadiah. Untuk simulasi bisa diwakilkan oleh Bu Lala. Jadi untuk teman-teman bisa dipersiapkan seperti yang sudah diinformasikan sebelumnya.
Baik, saya akan mencoba mensimulasikan dari pemberian. Halo, cek. Oke. Baik. Untuk simulasi, teman-teman, nantinya akan dilakukan langsung oleh Kepala Biro Kemahasiswaan dengan membawa. Halo, cek. Jadi nanti untuk simulasi pemberian bukti juara, Bu Nurafika Zulianti akan seperti ini posisinya ya teman-teman ya. Nantinya yang ada, halo cek, nanti ketika di YouTube akan muncul dua layar, yaitu layar dari Bu Rafika dan layar dari teman-teman juara. Jadi teman-teman juara nantinya harus menyalakan mic dan menyalakan kamera, atau cukup menyalakan kamera, dan nanti bisa sambil membawa kertas seperti ini, dan nanti akan dilakukan sesi dokumentasi oleh pihak panitia. Begitu. Dan selanjutnya, nanti dari selesai best speaker, pembicara terbaik, selanjutnya nanti ke juara keempat dari lomba debat bahasa Indonesia sama sampai ke juara 1 lomba debat bahasa Indonesia. Lalu bagaimana dengan teman-teman yang baru selesai melaksanakan grand final dari Unisla English Debate Competition? Nanti teman-teman dari UEDC bisa on cam saja, cukup on cam saja sambil Bu Rafika nanti membawa tulisan tanda juara. Nantinya di PowerPoint akan kami sertakan. Nantinya akan kami sertakan nantinya akan kami sertakan untuk data-data para juara dari UEDC. Sekian. Bila ada yang dipertanyakan, silahkan nanti dipertanyakan via chat. Terima kasih.
Baik, kita coba untuk simulasi secara langsung ya, secara virtualnya. Mungkin bisa ke juara best speaker, Rindang Syafaat. Halo, Rindang Syafaat.
Ya, hadir Mbak.
Oke, sudah disiapkan ya ini semuanya. Kita coba simulasinya ya untuk pemberian hadiah. Ketika nanti dibacakan namanya oleh Ibu Nurafika, bisa menyalakan mic-nya. Silakan.
Rindang bisa mendengar suara saya?
Bisa, Bu.
Rindang Syafaat?
Bisa, Ibu.
Oke, nanti saya akan berikan ucapan selamat ya untuk Rindang Syafaat sebagai best speaker pada kompetisi Lomba Debat Bahasa Indonesia LDBI tingkat Jawa Timur Universitas Islam Lamongan. Gitu ya Rindang Syafaat?
Baik, Ibu.
Oke, next.
Baik, untuk teman-teman rekan-rekan semua sudah paham semua ya, seperti yang dicontohkan oleh Rindang Syafaat. Baik, acara siang hari ini akan kami mulai. Baik rekan-rekan, acara akan kita mulai 15 menit lagi. Terima kasih.